Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications at SBAM. Thanks for tuning in. And before we get to today's topics, Brian, why don't you let everybody know where you are today?
Yeah, if it looks like I'm in a hotel room, it's because I'm in a hotel room. We have an order, several things going on in Marquette. So all the way up north, and what a beautiful time it is to be here too. It's actually stunningly beautiful. It always is up here, but like blue skies, nice day, little cool, of course, off the water, but came over the bridge and boy, I don't know, of course, what it looks like downstate right now, but it is definitely putting on a show. It's the sort of day when you got a local chamber of commerce ought to be taking pictures to show the world what this place looks like.
I love it. I love it. I'm glad you guys got there safely, and I'm sure you look forward to connecting with members today. We are enjoying some sunshine here in Lansing too, so pleasant day all around. We have a couple of big items to talk about today, some changes that have come from the U.S. Department of Labor. This on the heels of the independent contractor limitations that already took effect on March 11th. So let's start with new adjustments and changes to the overtime threshold. What's happening?
Yeah, this is a big one and it will affect many businesses. And I won't be surprised in this case if there's a legal challenge later on, but there's because this issue has come up. It did come up during the Obama administration and ended up getting blocked back then. But just as a refresher, and actually it's good to stay up on this sort of thing because a lot of people think that as long as you pay somebody a salary, that they are not entitled to overtime. That is actually not true. Salary is one factor, but there are other factors that are included when considering if somebody is exempt or not exempt from overtime. But one of the things is a salary threshold, which right now is at about $35,000, $35,568. The salary is that amount or less, then somebody's automatically entitled to overtime, no matter what their job responsibilities, authorities are. What this new rule that was published this week says is that threshold will be increased in two different increments. July 1st, it'll be increased up to $43,888, and then January 1st, 2025 to $58,656. What that means is that by the time January rolls around, that anybody with a salary at $58,656 a year or less, and it doesn't, and this is income. I said salary, but just think of it as income. Anybody whose income is $58,656 or less is automatically considered non-exempt or qualifies for overtime, no matter if they have an administrative or executive or what the functions of the job are. It's a threshold that automatically puts somebody in the overtime category. So that's a really big increase, going from 35,000 up to 58,000.
I did share a link to an article on our site that goes through the thresholds. But Brian, when does this go into effect?
So it goes in, there are a couple of key dates to keep in mind. So first is July 1st. On July 1st, it takes that first increase from that $35,000 up to 43, almost $44,000. And then 6 months later, the 1st of January 2025, it goes up to $58,656. And then it will then increase on a schedule after that as well. So it's built-in automatic increases at that point. Let's see, July 1st, 2027 would be the next time when there would be an inflationary adjustment that gets made. So it's a pretty big change that is that will impact many businesses. There've been changes like over with minimum wage, and sometimes like people look at, well, maybe this affects me, maybe it doesn't. Really, this one will have a pretty big impact. I mean, literally will impact millions and millions of employment relationships across the country.
All right, I do have two follow-up questions. So the first is, and I do want to get to some of those ramifications, but does the definition of exempt employee change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So so one of the definitions or one of the kind of requirements or criteria is that salary threshold. So that salary threshold is the part that changes. What the other things on there, which is first is to be paid a salary, meaning that the amount that they pay are paid is is set. So if you are you have a set salary. The salary is at that threshold or below. And then also, do you primarily perform executive, administrative, or professional duties as provided by the department's regulations? So that part of the regulation, so the jobs duties part does not change. So the things that if you are, say, somebody is at $60,000 a year, so they're above this threshold, they still have to meet those same requirements that it is a professional, administrative, or executive function that is being performed. That part of it, that definition does not change.
All right, and you did kind of mention some of the ramifications. So what do our members need to prepare for? How will this change how they employ people?
I think out in the real world, I think of this like there's some obvious changes. It will increase cost to employers. That's a given. But the ramifications that I think are either I'm going to go ahead and call them unanticipated, although these should be anticipated, or maybe unintended consequences, is that it will require that employers keep very close track of the hours that their employees are working. In other words, flexibility will probably, for those who are impacted, those under $58,000 per year, their flexibility is going to be impacted. Right now, employers can say, well, you're salaried, you have the right job functions, just get the work done. I don't care when you do it. And somebody can just have the flexibility. I can do a lot of the work and work long hours today, so I can work a little bit less tomorrow, or I got to take this afternoon off for a personal reason, but I know I'm going to later on tonight or tomorrow, I'm going to add in some extra time in order to do that. Today, employers, if you are salaried and you are over the threshold of $35,000, a lot of employers they don't really care anymore. They don't have to keep track. They don't require that you account for. You have to work from this time to this time. Uh, for those employees, I think it's likely that employers are going to have to keep closer track. They're going to have to set more rigid hours when the work has to be done. And otherwise, they have to pay time and a half to provide flexibility. So I think an unintended consequence, but not unanticipated, is that a lot of employees that are in this impacted threshold, they might be entitled to overtime, but employers are probably going to have to manage their hours more closely to ensure that they don't experience those cost increases. So loss of flexibility, I think, is a practical and predictable ramification from this.
And certainly a bigger impact now than potentially 4 years ago, now that we're in this world of hybrid work. So, all
Right.
right, well, thanks for that update. Another big piece of news that happened was the FTC ruling on non-compete agreements. What was the new rule and when does it take effect?
So this new rule on non-competes that was just published this week is very, very broad. It essentially outlaws non-compete agreements. And and these are used in a lot of different industries. They tend to be for higher level employees, but the definitions or the expansive nature of the language that they used, somebody might look at it and say, well, I don't do non-compete agreements, but really have like a non-solicitation agreement, or there's other things in an employment contract that protect proprietary information um, that really do protect the business, that there's certain things that are special about the business should a person be able to essentially steal um, uh, trade secrets or customer lists and that sort of thing when they leave, and just use it to either start their own business or to take it to one of your competitors. And this bans that the language in this is so expansive that it really does create a situation where businesses, I think, are going to be severely negatively impacted by people that can essentially come in, take information, and with no restrictions whatsoever, just leave with that information and take it to a competitor. And so I think what it does is it creates an incentive for competitors um, to essentially hire people away just to get secrets. In particular customer lists. So it passed the Federal Trade Commission by a 3-2 vote, which is, it's pretty. A lot of times it doesn't come down to that when they pass these new rules. It's not like right along partisan appointee lines. In this case, it was. And then it's according to the FTC, 30 million people um, fall under these types of agreements, and that's how many would be impacted by it. And then it will, you'd asked about taking effect. The effective date, let's see here. I think it's 4 months. I should have counted that out, but I'm just realizing that I didn't get
I
the
think
exact
that sounds right too. 120 days
120
after
days from
published. Yeah,
when the rule was published.
right.
It will go into effect. So we'll be on the heels of this very, very quickly.
Yes, very quickly. And so you did mention that there are a lot of non-compete agreements already in place. Will anybody have an exception to this new rule?
Yeah, so it's a little, I guess it's not complicated, but it's nuanced here. So there are no exceptions for anybody, but there are some that are grandfathered in. So, so whether it's a top level senior executive, let's say that, an investor group hires in a CEO, not even the CEO of a company can be subject to a non-compete agreement moving forward. However, there is the asterisk in that is that senior level executives that have current non-competes, those current non-competes are grandfathered in. So you might ask the question, what's a senior level executive? Well, they set a salary threshold in terms of a definition for that. So just being a senior level executive is not enough. It's 100 and it's kind of an odd number. I had to write it down. About $150,000, just over $150,000 in salary per year before you can be considered a senior executive that gets that exemption. So 120 days is when this will take effect. It will apply to every position in every organization. It will immediately nullify every existing agreement that for a person with a salary under $150,000, and then $151,164. That's the number.
To be exact.
$151,164. It will automatically nullify any existing agreement with somebody with a salary below that amount, a senior level executive with a salary over that amount. There that are currently subject to one of these agreements, theirs is grandfathered in.
So we asked about the ramifications of the overtime rules. Let's talk about the ramifications here. How will this change how people do business?
Yeah, I think this one is going to this will have a lot of unintended consequences, and it'll be difficult to really suss them all out at this point. But I think some of the more obvious ones are that it will require much more kind of siloing or segmentation within how somebody does business. So, for example, customer lists and sales reps and people that are handling information for portfolios of work, that businesses will probably try to segment them and not have cross training, not have bigger teams that are working on across customer accounts. They'll try to segment them more to limit the risk of the competition essentially taking advantage of this rule. I think other portions of employment contracts might be beefed up, particularly trade secret type things, for there to be other ways to get at the same thing that's not a direct non-solicitation or non compete agreement. So Um, this, I think it really it puts businesses or business owners in a very defensive position. But like business owners are always in a defensive position, but it's like a defensive position with their own employees. And that's where I think the ramifications that are direct will be substantial, but the indirect ramifications of this, I think, could be much more impactful just because of that, creating this weird scenario where a business owner now has to look at certain members of their own team as threats as opposed to strengths. And lest anybody say that, look, just pay somebody enough and it doesn't matter. But I mean, there are limits to these things, and there are special entrepreneurs uh, that create special processes and ways of serving their customers. Like there's real value in that is created by the entrepreneur. This this type the breathtaking scope of this ban is such that it essentially says to an entrepreneur that no matter how special and unique and effective the thing is that you do, there's no protection for it. Anybody who works for you could just take that someplace else. Another ramification, though, I think more business owners are probably going to figure out whether or not what they do can be patented in some way to protect themselves as well. So, I mean, I think at this point, people really have to look at what are the other tools, because I can assure you that the Biden administration in moving forward with this rule, they're thinking about like the idea of, somebody is on a sales team, they have these non-competes and they're kind of stuck in that place. They're looking at kind of a narrow scenario here, but really in the highly competitive business world, this creates a dynamic between competitors that you might have a couple of employees or a few employees that benefit overall from this, but I think that the defensive posture and the incentives that it puts in, the type of incentives for the nasty part of competition, gets those incentives grow exponentially under this new world.
So last year, SBAM did issue a call to action on the non-compete rule that was being proposed, but that was a year ago. Are these rules both a done deal now, or is there anything we can do or our members can do?
Well, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has already challenged the non-compete rule in a federal court in Texas. And what they are saying in this, we don't have to get into the nuance of the challenge, but basically what they're saying is that the FTC doesn't have the authority to do this. And what they're pointing to is that the act or the definition that the FTC is pointing to in implementing this rule, that they don't even have rulemaking authority for in the first place. And that is, and so anyway, that's making its way through the process. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a preliminary injunction on this one that got issued that gives a little bit of breathing room between now and when it's resolved in a final way. The overtime threshold rule hasn't been challenged yet. It has been challenged in the past. Remember that something similar to this was proposed in the Obama administration and was successfully challenged. So I won't be surprised if these get hung up in court. But there's some time. It takes time for these things to happen. SBAM actually has a hearing tomorrow with our challenge against the Corporate Transparency Act, which is another one of these things that one actually passed as part of a law, an item stuck in the Defense Act. Huge bill that this little thing got stuck in there that has such a big impact on small businesses. These two were done in the rulemaking process, which is very difficult to impact. It's not something that is transparent. So a couple of things. So right now, court is really the only direction that we can go. Technically, Congress could pass a law to overturn it, but Congress, as it exists today, is not going to overturn a law or a rule that is passed by the Biden administration. And even if they did pass that law, a new law, he's not going to sign it because it would be overturning his own rules. So really, court is the only immediate way to change these rules. And then looking forward in the future, we just need a better FTC. We need better appointees in the FTC and to do well.
All right. Well, thanks for the updates there and for walking us through how it's going to impact our members. A couple more stories to cover. The next one is about an economic development proposal that has been put on the table by House Republicans. How does it stack up to our priorities here at SBAM?
Yeah, we talked about the economic development proposals that had moved through various stages of the legislature, and a few of those components that SBM was supporting that were proposed by the Democrats. And then so that the House Republicans have put some ideas on the table. So naturally what we do is just like we do for the Democrats, we use the measuring stick of what are SBM's policies. And the Republicans have some components that actually stack up quite well. First, which the first one that we don't have a policy on, but is probably generally a good idea, mandatory audits of the state's job placement programs to measure hiring, pay, and the number of people served when the state gives incentives. So the state pays incentives. How did things turn out, and how closely is that really monitored? Not really one that's an SBM policy per se, but just kind of a general good government thing. The rolling back of the state's income tax rate back to 4.25%. You might recall that we had advocated strongly that our members, who the income tax rate is their main business tax that they pay, when that rate rolled back, that it was a tax cut for them, and then it through administrative means they've increased it back up to 4.25%. So another good one, restoring right to work, a long-standing SBM policy position that was in place. It got repealed last year. And then that's more of an overall environment. While it's not for small business in particular, most are not unionized, so right to work is not of a direct impact. But the reason that we had to have a very long-standing and actually very long-standing policy position in favor of right to work is because it's the overall kind of business climate and overall growth. And then streamlining state regulations, from reviewing licensing and regulatory rules to preventing state government from setting rules that are stricter than federal minimums. And this is actually, well, I think in a lot of cases, those other ones, income tax rate, right to work, people get a lot of attention. But this last one is actually probably the most impactful. And as we see at the federal level, as they make these rules and the rules are done without laws passing, they can have profound impacts on business. So the reg reforms and the rulemaking limitations, definitely something that fits well with priorities. So we don't look at this as an either or type situation. The House Democrats actually presented a really strong research and development tax credit that has a small business component. We also support that. The bigger job development incentive that before has always just been available for bigger companies. To the extent that the state has one of those programs, and listen, they're always going to have one of those programs. They've taught this proposal, they've actually lowered the one that the Democrats proposed, lowered the new job creation thresholds to an area where some at least smaller middle-size businesses might actually be able to qualify for it. And again, a very positive change. So when we look at these things, we don't look at them as like an all or nothing or just this one or just that one. We put the measuring stick up against every single component and then decide on an individual basis which we can support. And in this case, the House Republicans put up several ideas worthy of our support.
All right. Let's go to a game changer with the UAW.
Yeah, kind of a shocker, really, that there had been many efforts to try to organize foreign auto worker or auto companies in the South, and they've never been successful. The UAW had never been successful until just this past week. So they had they have successfully organized, and it was not close, with a 73% yes vote from the auto workers, um, the um, the Volkswagen AG plant in Tennessee. So it's not deep south, but it's definitely south. The a Volkswagen plant. Now for Volkswagen, it's not. I mean, look at their plants in Germany; they're unionized. It is this is not like something that they're not used to. It's just that when they've developed in the U.S., when they've sought business in the U.S., they have tended to favor the South, and presumably that was to avoid unionization. But that's a big, big change. This is a very substantial plant, and it's one that is outside of the traditional big three that are always unionized. So a very, very big win for the UAW, and I think probably does bolster the the efforts for automakers, or for bolsters the confidence and the drive of the UAW to go further into the South. Um, Now, in terms of like, what does this mean? Michigan's a big auto production state. What does this really mean? Ironically, actually, it's probably not bad, and it might be good for Michigan that this is happening, because the if the South is not a haven from organizing, then the relative higher cost of Michigan being in Michigan, it changes that balance. So by the South potentially in the future becoming more expensive for automakers, then the incentive for automakers that otherwise might look at Michigan to go south goes down. So that's between states, but we have to also understand that the world is very, very big. And so the incentive to be in Mexico may have gone up. So like leaving Michigan, that incentive and going to another state may be going down. The incentive to go to Mexico probably goes up. So that's, I think it's a mixed bag for Michigan, but really in the automotive world, a seismic shift.
All right. I do want to mention one more thing before we say goodbye, and that is that we have opened up registration for our Small Business Summit and annual meeting. This is held on June 13th. It's going to be here in Lansing at the Lansing Center. It's a full day of networking, a show floor with a lot of exhibitors, lots of time to connect. We have express learning sessions, and then our keynote speaker is Jacob Brown. I'm going to drop a link here on Zoom and on Facebook as well, so you can learn more about his message, which is embracing fear and failing forward. We'd love to have you attend with us again, June 13th. Join us in Lansing. And then Brian, enjoy Marquette tonight at the O to O, and we'll be back here Monday at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, we have our owner to owner meeting that is coming up in Marquette at the Veerling. It's 119 South Front Street. So if you happen to be in Marquette and you're watching today and you weren't already planning on coming, I'll be actually it's 4 to 6. So just in a little while, I'll be heading up there and hope to see you there.